This video is going to give us a quick review of the ways in which we can measure central tendency, specifically finding different ways that we can essentially find the average of the data. So the words that we use or the ways that we measure the data should be familiar to us. Those words are mean, median, mode, and range. So these notes pick up from where we left off in class. We filled out a stem and leaf plot for this data that represents daily temperatures, our average daily temperatures in Tampa, Florida for each month. So we should have 12 pieces of data. We filled out our stem and leaf plot. We made sure to include a key. And when we do that, we just want to make sure we have all 12 pieces of data. So when I count up my leaves, I have 12 leaves, which verifies that I accounted for all 12 pieces of data. The other thing that I strongly encourage you to do, because I just think it makes adding up the data a little bit easier, is I like to take a subtotal of each row, and I like to make sure that I can add and come up with that total or that subtotal at least twice. So we've already gone through that in class today. So the subtotal of our row of values in the 60s is 323. For our row of temperatures in the 70s is 226. For the row of temperatures in the 80s is 330. And the grand total of all that data is 879. So it's important for us to know that, because we're going to need that information to calculate our first measure of central tendency. We're going to need that to figure out our mean, because our mean is determined by taking the total of our data, which is 879, and dividing it by the number of values of data, in this case 12. And when I do that using a calculator, I get 73.25. Now that is essentially just the average of the data. We're used to figuring out averages all the time, but a more mathematical word for average is mean. So the way we do that again is to take a total of all of our values and divide by the amount of values. So the total of the data was 879 divided by the number of values, which was 12. And I get 73.25. That basically means that the average temperature in Tampa, Florida is 73.25 degrees. So let's move on to the median. The median is nothing more than the middle ordered value. So what that requires is, first of all, that we list all the data in order. And our stem and leaf plot has essentially done that for us, because I can see that I have my data values running from 61 as my lowest temperature all the way through to 83 as my highest temperature. So there's different ways we can go about making sure or finding the middle. But what I do know is that I have 12 pieces of data. So if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values from the beginning of the data, because 6 is half of the 12 total. And then if I count backwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice when I went, after I counted backwards and ended in my row of 80s, I had to go to the end of my row of 70s and continue. So I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 forward. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 backwards. And I wound up actually with 2 values in the middle. Now, if we had an odd amount of data, I would just take the single value in the middle, and that would be my median. But since I have an even amount, I'm going to have to find the middle of those 2 values. So in this case, it's the equivalent of finding the middle of 76 and 78. Now you can visualize that the middle of those 2 numbers is 77, but the way we can do that mathematically is just to add those together and then to divide by 2. Okay, so it's the middle ordered value, or the average of the two middle ordered values. So in this case, the value is going to be 77. Now that's not an actual piece of data. That's actually an imaginary value that is in the middle of the two middle values of this data. Okay, so the mean is just the average, or more specifically, again, it's the total of the data divided by the amount of data pieces. The median is the middle ordered value. The mode is actually a really straightforward one. The mode is nothing more than the value that appears the most. So as I go back and look at my stem and leaf plot, I'm looking for the most number of leaves I have appearing. And actually here, I have two threes there, which mean I have two values of 63. I have two values of 82. And I also happen to have two values of 83. All of those show up most frequently. So our mode can be more than one value. So in this case, it's going to be 63 because it shows up twice. It's going to be 82 because it shows up just as frequently twice. And one more time, I have 83. So all of those show up most frequently. So the mode is the most frequently occurring value, or in this case, most frequently occurring values. Okay, last but not least is the range, and the range is nothing more than the greatest value, in this case 83, minus the smallest value, 61. And that's going to give me a value or a range of 22. Okay, so that is a quick review of our four measures of central tendency: the mean, the average, the median, the middle ordered number, or the average of the two middle ordered numbers if it's an even amount of data, the mode, the most frequently occurring piece of data, or it could be more than one piece of data that occurs most often, and the range, just the difference between the greatest value of data minus the smallest value of data. So what you're going to do is to take the data that's on the back of the notes, and you're going to create a stem and leaf plot, and then you're going to figure out the mean, median, mode, and range, but you're going to do that by way of answering questions on a Google form. And you're also going to define in your own words what mean, median, mode, and range are defined as. Okay, so the first thing you'll need to do is to accurately complete the stem and leaf plot for this data. Make sure you tally up and make sure you get your column totals correct so you can get your grand total correct, because you're going to need that information to accurately do some of your calculations. So complete the stem and leaf plot, complete the Google form that goes along with this, and we will review further when we meet tomorrow.